In a deep, gloom-soaked cave, under the light of the pale moonlight, Floria led a gray-haired man and offered to look at a majestic black panther. This wild, indomitable beast was a living symbol of humiliation to the most powerful empire of Leoplon. The prince, born among the black monster's teeth, was the sworn guardian of a family secret that caused his banishment and the stripping of his royal title. The heterogeneous, as they are called, have become the dregs of society, outcasts, stripped of their privileges and condemned to an existence in the shadows, far from the splendor of the imperial palace. The heterogeneous were once equals, living in harmony with their tribesmen. But over time, with changing power and growing intolerance, their fate has taken a grim turn. Now these banished princes and princesses, stripped of their right to the crown, and heterogeneous commoners became slaves in their native land or subjects in inhuman experiments, covered in shame and misery. Floria, imbued with this tragic story, stood in the cave, inwardly shuddering at the heightened perception of the suffering and humiliation the prince had endured. Against the backdrop of the dark stone labyrinth that emitted an ominous aura, the moon was restlessly peering out like a witness to the fate that had dethroned the crown prince and turned him into a shadow of himself. Despite his outward attractiveness, the prince, as if forgotten by the gods in this dark cave, emitted menacing growls when meeting new guests. The gray-haired man asked Floria to sedate the beast, and despite the ominous growling, the girl agreed. And how could she refuse? She was the one who had imprisoned the prince in this darkened tomb. Floria stood before the fearsome beast, as if transformed into a magnificent noblewoman, the mistress of flower-scent magic. Her gaze sparkled with elegant confidence, as if she was a true queen, ruling the world around her. As if reborn, she summoned the spirit of ancient noble beauty. Floria confidently assured the gray-haired man that she would easily put the beast to sleep, allowing him to begin his mysterious experiments. The magic of the scents of flowers permeating her being reproduced flower gardens and elite balls in the abode's imagination. Thus, the prince, like a puppet in her hands, became subject to her magical influence. The gray-haired man, proud of his daughter, decided to retreat temporarily, giving Floria and the Black Panther free rein in this mysterious moment. The air was filled with unknown magic, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and excitement, as if in the very center of a magical story, where even the most monstrous secrets and arcane spells find their harmony. The Black Panther, like the embodiment of a universal mystery, stared at Floria with its predatory gaze. In the tension of the moment, there was a feeling that the audience had witnessed a significant turn in the story. This moment was integral to the novel Obey the Flower, where Floria, embodied in the new world, was to face the protagonist, the crown prince, in a struggle between fate and her aspirations. Panther, sensing the coming of the decisive moment, tensed like an energized sword on the threshold of battle. And here before her stood the one who was to fulfill the inevitable. Floria, reborn on the pages of the novel into the body of an aristocrat. She, having imprisoned the prince in this cave, became an integral part of a mysterious world where passion, intrigue, and fateful decisions mingle. Floria, transporting her story to this world where days and nights are permeated with aristocratic elegance, decided to change her destiny and win acceptance by joining the Count's family. Invisible threads of plot intertwined in this enchanting moment, as if a scroll of romantic drama was unfolding before the eyes of the audience. Panther, as the embodiment of the most tragic chapter of this story, prepared to perform her role in a drama where love, betrayal, and fate intertwine in mesmerizing choreography. Floria, like an actress in the theater of fate, tried her best, striving to improve her life, though she knew that her path was inextricably bound up with a tragic scenario. She realized that in this whirlwind of events, with the prince at its center, her own life could be the first to end when the beast could not withstand the experiments and was freed from its shackles. Sitting in the exquisite garden, where every flower seemed to be a living character in this drama, Floria was approached by her older brother Arden. In this cold and cruel Vernon family, he stood out for his good-naturedness and gentleness. His face reflected disinterested concern, and he asked about Floria's condition. The girl, encapsulating the secrets of the novel's plot, thought for a moment before answering. She could easily have opened her soul to her good brother, but the force of the plot and the foregone events held her in a fearful embrace. Instead of sharing her fear, Floria only inarticulately whispered her anxiety about the work ahead with a rare look, remaining true to her role in this complex dance of fate. Arden, not realizing the full extent of her secret, only shrugged, offering her support in this ruthless world of Vernon. Arden, a soft-hearted man in the cold Vernon family, solved the mystery contained in Floria's words about a rare species. It was a prince whose appearance and character are hidden in the darkest recesses of the plot. Floria, confirming her brother's hunch, offered to check on the prince's condition before his father returned. She assured her brother that everything would be fine, as if in her role as an aristocrat who could overcome any difficulties. Walking into the depths of the cave where the beast inside the prince resided, Floria was gripped with worry. Her mind was filled with worries about the future of Arden and the other good people caught in this insidious vortex. She realized that if she could not master the savage prince, he would take the lives of the Vernon family members with him when he broke free of his shackles, and probably would not stop until he had made his deadly way. Floria, immersed in her thoughts, walked through the dark corridors, trying to find the strength and wisdom to subdue the prince's wild impulse. The wind of change was in her heart, a wind that could change not only her fate, but the fate of everyone she loved in this closed world of Vernon. Floria, with each step sinking into the darkness of the cave, as if into the very heart of darkness, tossed between fear and determination. It was clear to her that time was working for her, that the prince was undergoing an increasingly severe animal transformation, and she had to act quickly. Floria's heart pounded loudly, filling the cramped walls of the cave with sonorous beats. As she approached the cage where the prince was imprisoned, her gaze fell on the traces of blood on the prince's black fur. He was obviously fighting his inner beast, trying to contain its sinister power. The panther inside the cage growled appreciatively, its eyes flashing with savage fury. But suddenly the beast's gaze was fixed on Floria, as if she were its last hope. Floria, taking the vial full of the mysterious liquid in her hands, proceeded with her wise plan. She knew that each drop of this elixir permeated her body, making her a kind of magical channel. With the confidence she held within her, Floria applied a drop to her hand and, blowing gently on the prince like magic, the elixir's scent soaked the panther. At this moment, as if ancient magic was washing over the prince's body, his wild eyes lost the fire of rage, and he slowly but surely calmed down. Floria felt her own essence merge with the energy she channeled to the captive prince. The panther, now tamed by this magic, saddled its wild nature under the influence of the prudent Floria. Thus, in the dark cave of magic and trials, Floria continued her journey, preparing for the new challenges that awaited her ahead. Floria, with confidence in her voice, turned to the prince, named Cartel. Her eyes, stealthily illuminated by magic, met the panther's gaze, which radiated mysterious power. "Cartel," she whispered, as if casting a spell. "That's your name." The panther, reacting to the unexpected pronunciation of her name, straightened, eyes sparkling, and Cartel asked, "How do you know my name?" Floria, waving her hand in front of the panther as if dispersing the scent of flowers, replied, "I am a flower girl, and even though I am a half-breed, the magic of the scent of flowers flows in my veins. It's a gift that allows me to feel the energy around me and commune with nature." The prince, the occupant of this wild cave, furrowed his brows, but Floria continued her persuasive speech. "Your name, Cartel, rang out in the waves of fragrance that rushed past me. I heard it in the whisper of the wind, in the singing of birds, and even in the shadow of your own panther." Cartel, though used to the mysteries of his world, was somewhat taken aback by Floria's words. "Floria or not, it's impossible to read minds," he declared, muting his inner trepidation. Floria, deep in thought, realized that a unique moment had opened up before her. She decided to take advantage of it by playing on the thin line between truth and fiction. Claiming that flower girls have the gift of seeing only one truth in a lifetime, she immersed the prince in an atmosphere of mystery, as if the magic of the flower's scents penetrated to the very depths of his soul. But in truth, This information was only a skillfully made-up suggestion. Floria, as a half-breed, had no such power, and her knowledge of the prince was the result of her rebirth into the world of the novel. The plot of the story was already familiar to her. Offering the prince a deal, she looked into his eyes, giving him a moment of silent agreement. In that moment, an invisible melody of agreement sounded, as if the air was filled with the stirring energy of the deal. Floria, keeping her confidence, suggested a way to return the prince to his human form, but made him make a promise. A promise not to take revenge on the Vernon family for the experiments that had changed his life. Thus, in a dark cave where the play of light and shadow created a mysterious atmosphere, a silent drama began, where Floria and the prince's eyes met, their souls exchanged untold words. Floria, feeling the tension in the air reaching its limit, could not bear the silence and asked the prince about his decision. In answer to her question, the prince suddenly invited her to enter his cage. This proposal, like a sudden twist in the plot, brought a look of surprise to Floria's eyes. Surprisingly, Cartel reminded Floria that it was she herself who had proposed the deal. He emphasized that trust was key, and without it, a deal was impossible. The prince then offered to temporarily exchange power with Floria so that she could become human for a short time. This gesture, in his words, was meant to be an act of trust on Floria's part. Deciding that she needed to earn the prince's trust, Floria accepted the challenge. She realized that it was necessary not only to break the seal on Cartel while he was conscious, but also to gain his trust. All the more so when his animal instincts took over, he would be able to free himself from the seal on his own, just as he had in the book. Thus, in a dark cave where magic and decisions intertwined, Floria and the prince entered a new phase of their interaction, where trust and bargains became the key to unlocking the mysteries of their destiny. Inside the shackled cage, where darkness and mystery danced in the faint glow, Floria stepped, ready to pass through the gates of the wilderness. The prince's beastly eyes glittered in the darkness like a nightlight in a dense forest. He was imprisoned in his animal form, captivated by the curse that had brought his inhuman essence down upon him. The panther, head bowed, gazed toward Floria, as if asking for a magical touch that would free the prince from the claws of his animal essence. Floria's heart beat loudly, but she didn't let fear overcome her. With this assignment, she carried the burden of responsibility to the entire kingdom. Slowly approaching, Floria looked into the panther's eyes and saw in them the eclipse of a human soul captive in an animal body. She knelt down, gently touching the collar that bound the prince to his wild side. Her hand rested on the metal like a glowing feather, ready to resolve this magical knot. Floria's magic began to flow into the collar like a river into the depths of the earth. She could feel her powers blurring along each link, releasing the trapped energy. The prince, covered in darkness, felt the magic penetrating his essence, freeing him from the shackles of his beastly nature. Moment by moment, with each inhale and exhale, Floria continued to transmit her magic. In that magical moment, the boundaries between man and beast blurred, and a spark of light flickered in the prince's enchanted eyes. However, as Floria's strength waned, she fell to her knee, curled up next to the freed prince. He was human again, but his gaze, like a mirror of his soul, hinted that a panther still slumbered inside him, ready to awaken at any moment. A man with hair colored in the shades of the night sky, the epitome of mystery and elegant enigma. Cartel's predatory eyes glittered like stars in the vast cosmos, holding an inexhaustible supply of riddles. Floria had always wondered what the crown prince of this mysterious kingdom looked like. Suddenly, like a blob of shadow, Cartel pulled Floria against him. His presence was a storm of passion and unknown secrets. He caught her hesitation like the night wind in the forest, and the moment she tried to hide her fear, he seized that moment like the point of a blade ready to cut the secret threads. "Strange, isn't it, Floria?" he muttered, his voice sounding like a whisper of the night. "You seem more frightened of my human form than my beastly one. What is your fear, the reflection of my eyes, or what is hidden within me?" Floria, embarrassed, turned her gaze away. She had always claimed not to be afraid of Cartel, but his eyes, like two midnight stars, looked at her with contempt. The prince, with confidence on his face, mockingly assured her that he had no intention of killing her, adding that she should stop trembling, for it was in his power to give her just a taste of his true self. Thus, in a world of mystery and intrigue, Floria faced the prince, where dark secrets intertwined with promises and fear mingled with temptation. In this unpredictable world, where the prince's eyes glittered like the night sky, the solution to his mysterious nature was far from being solved. The moment Cartel realized his unusual encounter with the red stone on Floria's chest, the world around him seemed to freeze. The bright light reflected off the gem's luster, as if inviting attention with its sparkle. As if hypnotized, Cartel could not take his eyes off the mysterious amulet. As he watched the crown prince's fascinated attention, Floria instantly decided that it was the right moment to reveal the secret of the stone. Abruptly touching the chain, she snatched the pebble with a deft movement and held it in her hand as if it were a clue. Floria's words echoed in the silence as she informed Cartel of her urgent task of getting back to her father. She couldn't allow the thought that the lost time spent restoring Cartel's human form might be a barrier to her long-awaited reunion with her father. Grappling with her goal, Floria wasted no time. Cartel may have been a saved man, but now her duty to her father seemed no less important. With that determined mind, she ran out of the cage like a whirlwind, leaving Cartel alone with his musings and the shimmering pebble in his hand. Mixed feelings of anxiety, hope, and determination pulsed in her heart. Time was becoming a real test for Floria, and she was ready to overcome any difficulties in order to return to her father. Perhaps their meeting would not only be a homecoming, but also a new stage in the adventures that awaited them together. Floria slowed her steps, as if time had frozen in her eyes. The gaze directed at Cartel was filled with mixed emotions, sadness, nostalgia, and a certain amount of regret. Without the magic that had previously surrounded her companion, however, Cartel had lost his human form, turning once again into a dark panther trapped in a dark cage. Floria, as if in solemn promise, cast one last glance at her old ally. The defenseless panther, now only a ghostly memory of past events, stared at her out of the gloom. In the silence lay the hope that the next time they met, they could finally come to terms and make the long-awaited deal. With this in her heart, Floria made her way to the manor, where her father, faithful and wise, was waiting for her. The path led through the thickets of the dark forest, as if overcoming the power of darkness and uncharted secrets. The whispering of the wind only increased the inner tension, making it feel like every moment was the key to something important. It was going to be an exciting meeting with his father, and the manor had an air of mystery and majesty about it. The torchlight danced on the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to call to him. Floria paced as if waiting for a fateful moment that would turn her life around. Thus spins a whirlwind of events, mystical and mysterious, in which each character carries the weight of the past and the hope for the future. Floria, walking up the marble steps, could feel the tension building in the air. She had unexpectedly met her most annoying relative, her brother Rakus, who, like fire, immediately flared up in her path. For a moment, the world in the manor stood still, as if holding its breath, waiting for events to unfold. Rakus, before Floria could even greet him, had already called her a half-breed claiming to meet her father. With a smirk mixed with irony, he expressed doubts that her father had actually invited her. A slight mocking chuckle flashed across Floria's face, and with a haughtiness not lacking in brilliance, she declared that her father valued her far more highly than this sibling. Emphasizing her confidence, she announced that it was her father who she wished to see, not Rakus. In response to her words, Rakus erupted in rage, beginning to shout and wave his arms as if trying to tear off his sister's pretentious mask. Floria had no time for idle verbal arguments, however. She knew full well that a fight with her brother could drag on and distract from the main goal. With a hand gesture of magic, she instantly paralyzed Rakus, leaving him flailing and flailing his arms helplessly in an attempt to free himself from the invisible shackles of the temporary spell. That way, Floria could easily get past the fraternal resistance, heading towards her father's study with noble pride and a clear intent to finish the conversation she had started. The shadows of mystery continued to hang over the estate, but with each step they grew denser, as if foreshadowing the coming revelation of family secrets and momentous decisions. Facing Rakus, Floria raised her eyes full of confidence, and pronounced that the foolish man, no matter how much of a brother he was, didn't stand a chance against her. Her words penetrated Rakis's mind, leaving a look of ignorance and misunderstanding on his confused face. Floria, still calm, added that their conversation ended here and now. Passing her brother, she headed deeper into the manor, leaving him with his own musings. The shadow of the past encounter met her path, but Floria's gaze was already fixed on her father's study, where her long-awaited meeting would take shape. When Floria entered the study, she found her father seated on the sofa in a lounging pose, as if he were the ruler of his kingdom. He noted that Floria was late, looking at her with a stern look. Floria, without losing her noble demeanor, responded by explaining that the reason for the delay was the inevitable confrontation with Rakis. In response, his father only snorted and remarked that Rakis was of no use, as if to emphasize the futility of brotherly confrontations. Thus began a discussion where long-standing family ties were intertwined, and in every word resounded not only concern, but also the mystery of the secrets lurking in the very depths of the family heritage. In the shadowy hall, where light streamed through the glass, Floria stepped into the fiery twilight, where she was met by her father's serious gaze. He listened to her report on the condition of the rare species with perfect attentiveness. Her words sounded alarming like the ringing of bells, and she described how the heart of their rare species had so far avoided pain, like a thin crystal, a little sensitive. Her father, seated at the massive table, with the look of a seasoned lord, listened and made his decision at once. He ordered Floria to keep vigilant watch over the Zerum, hoping to be able to move it into the walls of the manor by next week. Then, like a conductor leading his orchestra, the father told his daughter to go to rest. Floria, bowing to her father, uttered a promise that he could always rely on her. As she left the hall, she felt the invisible weight of responsibility on her shoulders. And every time her father's gaze crossed her eyes, she felt like she was going through an unsatisfying exam. Despite her dedication and diligence, the snow-white corridors, like pathways to the deepest depths of her soul, led Floria to a door that held a dark secret. Her heart beat loudly, each step reminding her of what was hidden inside. Knocking, she opened the door and entered the room where Elna Vernon, the Earl's wife, lay. Floria's gaze glanced around the room, which was filled with soft light, as if it were a chamber where the most intimate truth was kept. Ellen, the only one who cared for the half-breeds as if they were her own children, was now unconcerned. She had organized an escape for the heterogeneous, imprisoned by Count Vernon, who had become his hostages. That day after her escape, Ellen lost her mind and became feeble-minded. To the world it was an accident, but Floria knew the truth, knew that the Count's hand was behind it. The sight of Ellen's lifeless body filled her with remorse, as if every time she crossed the threshold of this room, she was signing her own death warrant. She had witnessed the dark intrigues her family was embroiled in, and the secret was a heavy burden she carried on her fragile shoulders. In silence, so full of unspoken emotions, Floria and Ellen looked at each other. Their eyes read 1,000 words, but none of them could break through the closed nature of their souls. Ellen, bereft of reason, seemed a mysterious reflection of the past, and Floria could feel the determination growing inside her. Standing directly in front of Ellen's bed, Floria silently said her farewell words. The promise to return hung in the air again, like an invisible thread linking past and future. Ellen, as if in a dream, did not answer, and the room remained filled with silence. Silently closing the door behind her, Floria walked down the corridors, her thoughts like whirlwinds swirling around the question of whether she could protect herself and those she loved. Her eyes sparkled with determination, and her heart beat with the rhythm of hope. In that moment, she realized that the path before her would be difficult, but she carried on her shoulders the burden of not only her destiny, but the fate of all who depended on her. She moved forward with determination despite the shadows of the past, and a fire of determination burned in her eyes that would not be extinguished until she reached her goal. At the end of the night, when the shadows melted away before the first rays of dawn, Floria decided to walk through the darkness again and return to the cave where the fierce gaze of the panther awaited her. As she stepped into the sacred space of the beast, its savage gaze, like the fire of ancient elements, stared at her from its metal cage. Floria froze in suspense, like the shadow that covers a bold traveler. All her senses were on edge as she, holding her breath, approached the cage where the animal essence of the prince of the ancient race resided. Daring to take a step closer, she met the panther's menacing gaze, in which flickered hidden secrets. Whispering her plea into the winds of time, Floria turned to the huge crown prince, who at this moment seemed to be a sort of prisoner in his own metal labyrinth. The words, sliding down the damp walls of the cave, called for a change in the beastly behavior. As if flapping her wings of hope, she inhaled deeply and expressed her request that the prince not repeat his wild antics of the past day. However, it wasn't until she met her gaze with the panther's eyes that she felt her request pierce not only the air, but the depths of his being. The prince, as if playing with her expectations, asked a question that shrouded her in ignorance. "How did I behave yesterday?" came sharply from his lips. The question stumped Floria, confusing and confounding her understanding. In response to her bewilderment, the prince only flashed his beastly eyes, promising that he would be more restrained this time. Surrounded by magic and secrets, Floria finally broke the last barrier of fear and entered the animal arena. She once again channeled the flow of her magic into the collar, transforming the prince into a human. Cartel, regaining his human form, witnessed the intertwining of his destiny with the magical weaver, leading him to the uncharted origins of change. Floria, sensing that the spectacle before her required immediate correction, quickly retrieved her cloak and tossed it to Cartel like a caressing shadow to cover his now human nakedness. The lightness of the girl's movements and her determination created a special atmosphere in the air, as if she had taken on the role of a guardian of fate, protecting the prince's dignity. Cartel, however, realizing his nakedness for the first time, stared at the offered rags as if they were abstract riddles, not quite knowing what to do with them. These scraps of cloth seemed to him some alien element in his world, so far removed from his usual animal essence. Suddenly, breaking the silence, which had become too tense, Cartel, with an unknowable confidence, told the embarrassed Floria that in his past life, because of his beastly appearance, he had not had to wear clothes. These words pierced the air like arrows, leaving echoes of mystery and unknown experiences. Floria, for her part, felt the color of shame spilling over her cheeks, realizing that now she was not only to control magic and fate, but also to help the crown prince get used to the habits of human existence. Confused but determined, she approached the prince, ready to lend her support in this new challenge. Floria, carefully wrapping the cloak around the crown prince's body, was faced with an unexpected challenge. Not knowing where to keep her eyes at this time, she tried to focus on the task at hand, trying to make everything as natural as possible. At that instant, noticing Cartel registering her awkwardness with a smile, Floria suddenly slowed her movements. In a steady silence, interrupted only by the rustle of clothes, she continued to help the prince in the process of dressing, but inwardly she felt the tension, as if she had become part of a theatrical performance, where every look, every gesture had its own meaning. At that moment, as if pausing to sketch his smile, Cartel noticed a change in her demeanor. Floria, sensing that something had changed, irritably thought about how the prince's habit of bullying her still persisted, even in this moment of change. Despite her irritation, she continued her mission, slowly dressing the prince. Still engaged in this delicate process, Cartel, noting with satisfaction that he was quite enjoying the situation, raised his smile to a new level. Finally, the prince, meeting her irritated gaze, suggested that next time he would dress himself. In response to his statement, Floria, with a mixture of determination and a touch of humor in her voice, said that it would be a great opportunity for him to show his independence and dressing skills. Cartel, accustomed to his animal form, clumsily adjusted his cloak, feeling the excess fabric rustle under his paws. The prince was clearly displeased, noticing the excess in the matter which irritated him. The sleeves of his cloak were already torn, and he expressed his displeasure at this fact. At that moment, Floria, a beautiful woman with eyes full of disappointment, looked at the prince with some reproach. She found it difficult to carry this overly expansive cloak into the long-forgotten cave, and she began to wonder if she should link her fate with the cartel at all. But despite her difficulties, Floria still decided to approach the prince and start talking about the treaty that lay before them. Through the tense silence, Floria announced that she intended to marry Cartel. Her words hung in the air like an invisible plume of mystery. Cartel, his eyes deep in thought, began to ponder this unexpected turn. His face reflected the realization that it wasn't just his clothes that were now causing concern. However, when Cartel expressed his doubts about Floria's mental state, she didn't hesitate to reply. She spoke of her father, who would go on to conduct experiments on the prince's animal form. Cartel's fate in this tragic scenario was to slowly lose his sanity, and unable to bear it any longer, he would make his escape. In Floria's opinion, however, this escape would have disastrous consequences. "A year from now," Floria continued, "you, in your panther form, will be forced to kill my entire family." With each word, her voice sounded like a foreboding, and the clouds drew tighter, as if to emphasize the weight of her words. But Cartel, true to his confidence and disbelief in predictions, only dismissed Floria's words. "You're talking nonsense," he declared, not taking what he said to heart. There was a certainty in his eyes that these predictions were just someone else's confusion, despite all the mystery surrounding them. Floria expressed her reluctance to marry Cartel. According to her, this decision was not because of a burning desire to become a spouse, but because of an urgent need to protect herself from her father's experiments. She emphasized that Earl Vernon, her father, is an avid collector of rare specimens, and as of late, it was Cartel who had become the main exhibit in his collection. The Count, preferring to collect unusual and unique individuals, put his daughter in front of a choice: either marry Cartel or undergo further biological experimentation. Floria realized that in this situation, marrying Cartel might be a kind of escape from her father's gruesome experiments. Suddenly, however, Cartel uttered words that made Floria think. He noticed that this was the reason she used the blessing of the flower on him, symbolizing the betrothal. Floria was amazed that he had found this out, for she had told no one of her hidden plans. Now the question arose in Floria's mind: how had the Cartel come to know her secret intentions? She had kept it a closely guarded secret so that no one could interfere with her plans. The tension in the room became palpable, and the mysteriousness of the situation only heightened the intrigue surrounding Floria's future marriage and elopement. Floria, feeling overwhelmed by the circumstances, decided to break the deadlock in which her own false words had driven her. She decided to confess to Cartel that she did not actually have the gift of the flower blessing, and that her words were just a product of fantasy. Cartel, coming closer with a questioning look, asked why she had misled him. Floria sighed, realizing that she couldn't tell him the whole truth, because that would undermine her plans. Instead, she decided to say that she had lied because of the urgency of the situation and the need for a quick decision. The Cartel accepted her explanation with surprising ease, which amazed Floria herself. He nodded, as if realizing the complexity of the situation, and at the same time looked at her sternly, expressing a demand not to deceive again. This moment created a tension in the room that seemed to come over both of them, as if warning that further intrigue might be even more complicated. Floria, flustered, realized that her game was getting more complicated with each step, and she would have to proceed carefully to avoid revealing her real plans. Cartel stood before Floria like a shadow, expressing his demands. In the moment it took for her to make him a promise, a strange mix of emotions, both fear and determination, rumbled and hummed in her soul. A chill ran up her spine, but at the same time the fire in her eyes indicated a readiness to fight. Those predatory eyes of Cartel's, as if drilling into her soul, made Floria fearful. She realized she was playing with fire, but she was willing to do anything to preserve her integrity. Through the inner fog of fear, she managed to pull herself together. Floria looked at Cartel, straight into his predatory eyes. From her lips came a promise, quiet but firm. The next moment, however, despite her apparent suppleness, Floria took the chain of the collar and tugged, as if to remind her of her strength and determination. "Now we'll communicate with me in a nice way," she declared, emphasizing her dominant position. This unpredictable turn of events added spice to the relationship between Floria and the cartel, emphasizing the complexity of their interaction and introducing an element of intrigue and subjugation into the story. Floria and Cartel's faces were so close that you could feel each other's breath. The tension in the air was palpable, and just when it seemed that Floria was holding control, Cartel took the initiative again. He pressed her firmly against him, as if he were holding his prey. Cartel's fingers gripped the braid of Floria's pink hair, and his kiss was so unexpected that she was almost speechless. His words, calling her a fearless flower, sounded like honey in her ears, but at the same time she felt something more complex and mysterious conclude. "Our pact is made," he said, sealing his words with a kiss. That moment, like a seal, remained in their minds, creating an indefinable tension and making Floria realize that she had been drawn into a game that could have far more serious consequences than she had imagined. Under the starlight that filtered through the dark oak branches, a mysterious event began at the Earl of Vernon's castle. The heart of the night held something mysterious, and it was at that moment that fates intertwined like the threads of a great carpet. Surrounded by ancient walls, where each stone radiated a story of its own past, a scandal erupted that echoed through the dark corridors of the manor. In the hands of Rachis, Vernon's son, was a heavy, precious vase, a beauty whose glassy beauty was unattainable. But now it was shattered, its brilliance swallowed up by the darkness of night. Rachis, young and clumsy, touched his head where a stormy gale of pain raged. All the while the anger of Earl Vernon was in the air, turning into a thunderous sky in the blink of an eye, gathering clouds of his wrath. The Count, the lord of this castle, shouted words that staggered the ears, words of unbelief in kinship, of a glass beauty not worth a drop of blood. "You are not my son. I cannot believe that my blood runs through your veins," roared the Count, as if to reveal the depths of his mental confusion. And then he spilled his fury on the innocent Rachis, declaring that even if he were to sell it 30 times, it would not cover the loss of the precious vase. In that tragic moment, as the Count's words cut the air, Rachis begged for leniency, his prayers becoming a brass chime in the silence of the night. But at this time, one who possessed beauty and wisdom, Floria, entered the scene. She stood between her father and brother like a snow-white angel, whose eyes sparkled like constellations in the night sky. Her presence filled the room with nobility and determination. In her voice was a decision to stop this family conflict that could have destroyed all ties between them. At the Count's anger, Floria, like a brave lioness, released an arrow of comfort in his direction. "Father, you are simply wasting your power on insignificant things," she declared resolutely, her words piercing the air like arrows in the night. She did not bow to the storm of anger, and her gaze was a bright flame fighting the dark whirlwind of her father's rage. At this time Rachis, with the look of a pacified savior, looked at his sister. His eyes expressed gratitude for her wisdom and strength. He seemed oblivious to the drama of the vase, fascinated by the way Floria had wrestled with the storm of family passions. But Floria was different than her brother could have imagined. She floated a cheeky theory that Rachis was simply worried about their brother leaving the fortress. With a light tease, she suggested that the Count release Rachis' energy by giving him a role in managing the sewers. "For he has always dreamed of being useful to you, father," she added with a sly smile. The Count, stunned by the unexpected suggestion, raised an eyebrow in surprise. Rachis, in his despair, did not dare to object, immersed in the thought of having to accept this challenge. His heart beat faster, and he could feel his inner fighter taking over, despite his reluctance to plunge into the foulest place in the empire. "So be it, father," Rachis said, swallowing the lump in his throat. He could feel the heavy weight of duty weighing on his shoulders. But at that moment, he was willing to do it for his father, even if he was to become the lord of the sewers. And so it was that night at Earl Vernon's castle, when family ties were tested, and Rachis, against his wishes, agreed to be the keeper of the dark secrets of the sewers. Floria, on the other hand, like a cold-blooded strategist, wove a web of words to bring her family together in this mystical game of fate. Floria, like a virtuoso artist, changed her role in this theatrical play. She went from a daring strategy to a graceful plan that no one seemed to have foreseen. Her smile became a true light in this darkness, reflecting joy and satisfaction. "Oh, how wonderful that we now have a sewer in charge!" she exclaimed delightedly. Her gaze, full of gratitude, turned to Rakus as if he had become an unassuming hero, a savior from flooded streets and sewage problems. But there was also a touch of mystery and intelligence in that look. Floria's smile grew even wider as she suddenly assumed her most innocent appearance. Her eyes fluttered, her hands caressed her dress like timid butterflies, and she was like a flower that had just opened its petals. "Oh, father, I did not expect to say it so soon, but I should like to marry," she said, as if she were uttering the deepest desire that lurked in her soul. The Count, whipped by the storm of events, was astonished at this unexpected turn. His daughter, previously so strong and confident, now appeared to him as a girl dreaming of her wedding. Floria, like an actress on a stage, played her part skillfully, but her eyes flashed with the fire of manipulation, a skill she had learned in this family drama. Thus the night at the Earl of Vernon's manor continued to revolve around its axis, where every moment was a mystery and every character a player in the theater of fate. Floria, taking the initiative again, created an air of uncertainty in the air, which only added to the mystery of the story. The Count's study fell into silence, as if time had stood still, dulling the whispers of the ancient walls. Floria, majestic and enigmatic, stood in the center of this gloom, waiting for the reaction she had no doubt skillfully anticipated. The atmosphere was filled with mystery, as if the winds of the past were lurking in the corners of the room, listening to the developments. Arden, coming to his senses after the initial shock, looked around anxiously, as if searching for a foothold in this dusky space. A question escaped his lips with a piercing roar. "Who do you want to marry, sister?" Floria, with a slight mocking chuckle on her lips, replied, as if she could read his mind, "My chosen one is a monster who dwells in a mysterious cave." The answer shook Arden to the core. The panther their father had been conducting his macabre experiments on had become the object of his sister's attention. Under the oppressive weight of surprise, he barely managed to mumble, "That panther?" Earl Vernon looked at Floria with undisguised surprise and bewilderment. His daughter, contrary to expectations, had made her choice in favor of the creature about which there were terrible rumors in the castle. The Count's heart froze in his chest like glass on a frosty night. Floria, however, gave no fated answers. Making up a legend on the fly, she put into it all her storytelling talents. "Flowers," she began, "attract monsters. The magic of my scent attracts them, and I am sure I can tame the panther that has consumed me with its mystery." Her words sounded like an incantation in that secret corner of the castle. So, magically, this mysterious episode in Floria's fate unfolded, obscuring all doubts and questions with its mystery. All that remained in their imagination were flower petals and shadows dancing in the magical light, which seemed to complete the chapter in this story, leaving the viewer in anticipation of the next mysteries. Earl Vernon, with his undeniable charisma and power, took a firm stance on the legend, arguing that it could not be a reason to marry. However, Floria appeared before him, with grace and confidence in her voice to soar above his doubts. She claimed that the panther, which was the weakness of the royal family, hid the mysterious cartel, a secret that must not be divulged. Ever since he was a child, Cartel was imprisoned in a cage, condemning him to the guise of a panther. However, despite this, he continued to be the crown prince of a great empire. Floria took it upon herself to change the balance of political power. By promising to turn the panther back into a human, she has raised a challenge not only to Count Vernon, but to the very foundations of the royal family, where intrigue and secrets are intertwined in an irreconcilable struggle for power. Floria, with determination in her eyes, announced to her father, the Earl of Vernon, that she was going to make a significant contribution to the history of the royal family. The Earl, sensing for the first time something mysterious in his daughter's decision, raised his eyebrows involuntarily, sensing that something unexpected was brewing in the gift presented to him. Floria looked up at her father with a graceful smile that emphasized her inner determination. Count Vernon, not unreasonably unraveling his daughter's smile, realized her heart's desire to unite with what seemed to many to be a monster living in the dark corners of their castle. Floria did not hide her intentions, and, as a confirmation of the secret, a confession sounded in her words. She said that Cartel was indeed a monster, but that if he took human form again, he would be crown prince again. This transition from monster to crown prince promised an exciting turn in the fate of not only Floria, but the entire royal family. The story of Cartel being born of the Empress was impressive in its mystery. The Empress, weakened by childbirth, departed this world, leaving only a child to her fated son. However, to keep the secret of the monster's birth, rumors of a deliberate miscarriage were spread, and the Empress's corpse adorned the beachhead like an executed man, visualizing the sentence of royalty. Such complex intrigues and vicissitudes of fate, intertwined with the determination of Floria, forced the viewer to plunge into a whirlwind of events, where human passions and secrets of the royal court took on new, unexpected shades. The Count, looking at his daughter with interest, did not conceal his surprise. "Why did you not tell me at once that our panther was the crown prince?" he asked, placing nonverbal signs of his disappointment at her lack of trust. Floria, sensing her father's question, realized that there was some distance between them and decided to loosen up. With a smile that genuinely cherished the sparks of determination, she replied that she did not want to burden the Count too soon, preferring to unravel the mysteries of the world on her own. "I don't want to marry an ordinary, powerless man," declared Floria, as if revealing her inner feelings. She continued to persuade her father, saying that her desire to be useful to him would not allow her to leave him by marrying him. It was a dilemma for her to be with her father or to submit her fate to a powerless suitor. Earl Vernon, listening attentively to his daughter, could not refrain from laughing, praising her ingenuity with admiration. He gave his blessing on her desire to be part of a great cause and take on the role of a new empress for him. So, in a mixture of laughter and joy, an unusual idea was born. They needed to find a suitable title for the panther before he turned into a human. This was part of a careful plan, so that news of the wedding could be sent without revealing the monster's secret human identity. This cunning intrigue, like a snake entwining itself, was the next twist in the story, where each step opened up new perspectives and forced the viewer into the mysterious world of the royal court. As he said goodbye, his father pointed out that the royal title of an overseas country would suit the monster just fine. The title was like a magnet, attracting the eyes of his subjects and emphasizing his power. Floria nodded as she listened carefully, recognizing in her father's words the possibility of uniting the countries through marriage to Cartel. She saw it as a chance to make Cartel a decent husband, for as long as he retained his panther form, there was hardly any talk of a royal marriage. "Let there be a wedding as a union of our states." A smile flashed across Floria's face, and a spark of hope flashed in her eyes. Her father, he said, would draw up the marriage contract later. This was a moment he had anticipated with pleasure, seeing in the future union not only a political move, but true love. But suddenly, like lightning in a clear sky, Arden stopped his father. Arden, stunned by the suddenness, did not understand how anyone could agree to such terms. He openly expressed his doubts without considering that it was Floria's own initiative. His heated words flew at his father like arrows aimed at Floria's honor and dignity. He couldn't believe his father would agree to such a thing. At that instant, something ached in Arden's chest. Not a physical ache, but rather a longing, an unfamiliar feeling that gripped his heart. He tried to stop his father, to prevent this unwanted alliance, even despite Floria's wishes. Arden remembered the days when Cartel had been only a prince, but now his future seemed submerged in shadows. In response to his son's objections, his father looked seriously at Arden, activating his magic ring as if summoning his inner strength to quell resentment. At that moment, the air was filled with energy, and light shone around the ring, demonstrating the steadfastness of his father's will. Arden and his father's dispute was becoming not only a family confrontation, but also a battle of magic and feelings. Floria, with sadness in her eyes, looked helplessly at the bowed Arden. It was painful to her to see the bonds of the family torn asunder by her father's strictness. She realized that at this moment she was powerless, unable to change her father's decision, and unable to stand between father and son. The father, stern and adamant, said he had already warned his children repeatedly of the consequences of disobedience. The ring, closely linked to the pendants that hung around each of his children's necks, served as a magical tool that allowed the father to summon them whenever he pleased and punish them for their own disruptions. These pendants were not only jewelry, but also magical labels designed to bend the will to the father. They were not only a memory of kinship, but also a bond that could draw children to their father like invisible threads when he thought it was time for instruction or punishment. Floria, though she felt powerless before this invisible magic, still did not give up. She was determined not to let these magical bonds separate them forever. Determination shimmered in her eyes, and she realized that perhaps it was in their hands that the power to change the inevitable lay. Under the power of the implacable Earl of Vernon, the pendants, as if shackled, despite their lightness, remained an integral part of the children of this unwilling family. The strong-willed Earl, like an omniscient guardian, always knew exactly where each of these pendants was at any given moment. Mixed in their childhood memories are memories of a painful past. Once, when the Earl became angry, Arden was punished, which, like a shadow, fell on Floria through her pendant. This moment was the children's discovery of the sad reality of their existence, where even moments of joy intersected with the shadow of suffering. But today, once again in his father's power, Arden was being punished for his disobedience. At the moment of farewell, as the Count was leaving them, Floria, in spite of her soul filled with anger and resentment, assured her father that she would not fail him. Her eyes concealing bitterness, and her firm resolve to restrain her anger, were the last moments when her father could see his daughter before he left. Having received her cherished permission to marry the mysterious monster, Floria's heart was filled with relief, allowing her to more easily make her visits to her lover's mysterious cave. Experiments on Cartel, as an exception, were now part of the past. In a few more days, the news of the upcoming wedding would spread throughout the kingdom like the winds of a spring morning. With each new day, more and more furniture appeared in the Cartel's cage, as if the space was preparing to welcome its new inhabitants. It was a marvelous theatrical outfit for the coming union. Floria, though she felt joy that she had succeeded in deceiving her father, still could not fully absorb the joy, for the situation with Arden remained a dark shadow in her soul. Unexpectedly for her, Arden was surprisingly stubborn in his unwillingness to see her in the panther's arms. She felt that even the blossoming garden of happiness she'd tried to create might be tested by the dark mysteries lurking in the depths of their family history. Arden, appealing to his sense of responsibility and concern for Floria, stood in the way of her impending fate. He passionately urged her to give up this incredible plan, which she refused to tell him about. While Arden strained to get his words to her heart, Floria remained unruffled, lying in the cage next to the mighty panther. The tension-filled room did not bode well for this unusual couple. Floria stood up suddenly, telling the panther with authority that she must obey her in the presence of other people, or the wedding would not take place. Her words sounded like a sentence, but to Arden it was another vague hint that his lover's mysterious plans continued to remain in the shadows. Suddenly there was a rustle in the room, and Cartel, with his keen animal hearing, raised his head warningly. Footsteps were approaching, and then, like lightning in a clear sky, Floria recognized the approaching guest. It was her older brother, Rikael. Floria, feeling the excitement and joy of seeing her own kin, jumped out of Cartel's cage, leaving behind her an amazed and slightly frightened animal. Rikael, oblivious to the circumstances, looked at Cartel with some wariness, as if suspecting him to be more than just a beast. Floria, filled with excitement and warmth at seeing her brother, could not resist asking Rikael how things were in the capital. But Rikael's gaze never left Cartel, and his words were filled with some mystery concerning this mysterious creature whom Floria was about to marry. Floria stared worriedly into Rikael's eyes as he made his unexpected comment about the wedding. It was like a whirlwind of unexpected emotions swirling through her mind. In her explanation, she tried to reveal the secret she had kept for so long. The panther who had won her heart turned out to be the lost crown prince of their great empire. Her story told a mysterious tale of a lost kingdom, scraps of memory and secret power structures, immersing Rikael in a world of mystery and magic. She emphasized the greatness and responsibility that rested on the shoulders of this panther, who was much more than just an animal. However, Rikael seemed indifferent in the face of this incredible story. He contemptuously stated that it was just an animal anyway. There was no room for magic in his eyes, and he treated the panther with disdain as a mere beast. Thus, the nuances of perception and differences in outlook came through in their conversation, leaving Floria with mixed feelings and a mystery that she now had to unravel in her mental labyrinths. Suddenly, there was a silence in the air, broken only by words that Cartel uttered with confidence and unabashed pride. "This, Sparrow, fear is a feeling that has long since left its expanse," he declared, as if mocking the moment when fear could still possess his heart. Floria held her breath for a moment as she heard those words. Her gaze flickered toward Rikael, fearing what those confident assertions of Cartel's might convey to him. Her eyes reflected her fear that Rikael would hear their conversation. But the bond between her and the panther was a kind of secret, closed off from outsiders. Floria realized that despite her fearfulness, she had a special communication with Cartel that remained intimate and confidential. Cartel's words, like magic, did not reach Rikael's ears, and Floria could breathe a sigh of relief knowing that her fears remained a secret, preserved in the ether between her and the panther. Rikael, who belonged to a race of birds with silver falcon wings, brought an exciting twist to the conversation. The mysterious roots of this mighty creature, belonging to the world of the air, began to open up before Floria like the pages of an ancient book. The blood of silver falcons touched each of his feathers, giving Rikael incredible grace and freedom of flight. The Cartel, as if recognizing the innermost secrets, decided to call Rikael Sparrow. For Floria, however, it was too impertinent and unacceptable. She felt resentment in her heart, as if an invisible wind of change was slowly beginning to call for action. Rikael, wasting no time, expressed his concerns about the upcoming wedding. He asked Floria if she was really going to marry a panther. Floria nodded decisively, her eyes glittering with determination like stars in the night sky. She said that Cartel would soon become human, as if anticipating the inevitable change in their fates. But then, Rikael swung his sword like a menacing eagle, offering a radical solution. He said that the panther should be killed before he turned into a human, to avoid not only the wedding, but also the potential threat that a human in the form of a panther could pose. Thus, the characters faced a difficult dilemma, and the tension in the air seemed to be building, anticipating a storm of passions and decisions. Rikael's eyes glittered with determination, as if they were weapons ready to awaken ancient powers. Even though Rikael was about to kill a pet from their father's collection, his gaze did not tremble. He was willing to take the most drastic action to prevent a wedding he believed carried the shadow of betrayal. Floria, realizing that time was running out for them to think and talk, had already begun to contemplate calling her father for help. However, the situation demanded immediate action, or else she risked the Cartel and Rikael being drawn into a deadly conflict. At that moment, Floria, as if suddenly remembering an incantation from her childhood, shouted, "Carol Picardi!" The sounds of those words filled the air like magic, suddenly slowing down. Cartel and Rikael stopped, as if their movements had been frozen in a strange moment in time. Rikael and Cartel, slightly confused by the awkward confusion of their names, looked at each other in surprise. At that very moment, as if a spell had brought an unexpected union, the atmosphere of tension dissipated, and the room became quiet again. Thus, Floria's words turned out to be the magic key that stopped the conflict and provided a chance to resolve the situation. Floria, feeling the embarrassment that seemed to envelop her, blushed under the gazes of Rikael and Cartel. Her determined words, like magic, brought sudden confusion. Her heart pounded harder as she realized she had given a name to the monster she had so carefully hidden from others. Rikael, for his part, found himself confused by Floria's sudden nickname for the panther, Carol. His feathery eyebrows furrowed as he tried to puzzle out this strange turn of events. How could something as mighty and majestic as Rikael be given a name? Floria, realizing her mistake, explained with a smile on her face that she could not call her future husband a monster. Then, after a moment's thought, she added that even her real name, Cartel, seemed inappropriate for this powerful creature. Cartel, for his part, expressed his displeasure with the new nickname. He felt that Carl was more appropriate for a house cat than for a creature of his power. Nevertheless, he hid his claws, preferring not to show his displeasure too blatantly. Thus an awkward tension hung in the room, as if a whirlwind of mixed feelings, and each character was caught up in a strange whirlpool of emotions and perceptions. Floria easily accompanied the calmed Rikael, and as they left the cave, a falcon landed softly on Rikael's arm. The feathered messenger seemed to embody some of the freedom of the heavens, giving Rikael's gaze an exquisite accompaniment of airy harmony. Floria greeted the bird with a smile, noticing that she and the falcon hadn't seen each other in a while. Her hand slid affectionately over the feathers, as if greeting an old friend. Floria's interaction with the falcon seemed to emphasize naturalness, as if she had a special language for communicating with nature. In her musings on fate and the mysterious information that Rikael found himself in possession of, the thought of how on earth he knew about the wedding suddenly flashed through her mind. Floria's attention was intercepted, however, when she noticed Arden watching their backs from the shadows of the manor. Arden, the silent observer, was present in their world like a spirit, maintaining his mystery. His gaze was stern and impenetrable, and Floria wondered what secrets lay in the soul of this enigmatic servant of the family. Thus, before the heroes had not only to solve the riddles of their own hearts, but also to uncover the secrets that beckoned them in the hidden corners of this magical world. Suddenly, as if not calmed by the previous events, Rikael brought up the subject of the wedding again. His eyes glittered with questions, as if he wanted to understand how Floria would feel about this inevitable share. But Floria, as if noticing that the threads of fate were developing too quickly, passed by without going into details. "Don't worry, I'm not going to tell my father about your decision," she stated, her gaze clear and determination evident in it. She decided to keep this moment a secret, anticipating the possible consequences. As she walked past, Floria wondered why Rikael was holding himself back for some reason. Something flickered in his eyes that she couldn't quite pinpoint, whether it was the shadow of unspoken feelings or secret motives escaping her notice. This moment caused Floria to ask new questions that held mystery, and perhaps the answers lay in the mysterious past or in the current situation. That evening, as Floria took a seat in her luxurious manor, Cheryl's maid was carefully arranging her hair. The lightness of the airy silk was in the evening breeze coming through the open window, like a breath of the night itself. Floria had eyes colored bright red, like precious rubies glittering in the moonlight. Those eyes were a reflection of the passion and secret desires that lurked in her soul, like a fire burning in the depths of her heart. Her hair was a true work of nature's art, shiny, like pink petals arranged in waves, creating a sense of weightlessness. It floated in the air like the gentle touch of a spring wind, and gathered into such an enchanting shape that it seemed as if nature itself had gone into creative ecstasy. Floria's face, like a bright moon in the heavens, radiated a light and beauty as beautiful as the finest roses in the garden. She was the epitome of splendor and grace, and her fair skin seemed like a touch of rose petals enveloped in the light fragrance of a spring morning. The evening was an enchanting guide to the world of her marvelous beauty. It was that evening when Floria realized why she had been nicknamed the Rose of the Vernon family, that she went down to the dining room for a communal dinner with members of her noble family. Her father, noticing her delay, did not refrain from making a remark expressing his displeasure. Floria smiled like a rose petal barking in the setting sun, and replied that she was tired of formal events, preferring the fresh air and solitude. As she took a seat at the table, Arden's awkward demeanor caught her attention. The looks and interactions were saturated with mystery, like a spring evening full of riddles and mysterious rustles. Floria caught that her presence was even causing Arden some anxiety. No wonder, for her impending marriage to the monster, as she was often called, could arouse a variety of emotions. She brought the glass of red wine to her lips like the intoxicating scent of roses, and, nodding at her future spouse, noticed a flicker of unease and uncertainty in his eyes. This moment was like a painting depicting the confluence of two worlds, colliding in a slow dance full of uncharted perspectives and inner conflicts. Floria, like a rose bearing beauty and poignancy, stood before the insurmountable challenges of her destiny. The Grand Earl of Vernon, having gathered his heirs in the sumptuous hall of the castle, announced the unexpected return of his eldest son, Riquel. The dinner held to mark the occasion was a veritable feast for the great aristocracy. Chords of nobility sounded, filling the hall with the light of a family reunion. The Count, towering over the table, invited everyone to begin the feast, and the brilliance of the candles reflected in his majestic eyes. Golden boxes and aristocratic costumes witnessed this magnificent moment. At the Count's question about the mysterious alicorn, Riquel spoke with a mysterious smile about the exceptional creation. This marvelous creature, whose features seemed to be taken from the most ancient legends, appeared before the eyes of the audience. Count Vernon remembered with pride the skillful hands with which he had created this magnificent miracle, an alicorn. It was not just a horse with a horn and wings, but a real chimera that embodied magic and demonic essence. The great Earl of Vernon, possessor of incredible skill and secret knowledge, made centuries-old legends a reality by creating with his own hands a magnificent miracle, an alicorn. This embodiment of the accuracy of descriptions from ancient chronicles and myths has become a true work of art, deserving the admiration and attention of all those present at Vernon Castle. This chimera, a product of the Count's imagination and art, appeared before the guests as an incredible combination of a horse with a horn and mighty wings. The exquisite harmonious appearance of the alicorn fascinated, and every step seemed to be a step into the world of magic and mystery. However, to create this magnificent creature, Count Vernon had to put in a lot of labor and magic. The energy of demonic beings interfered in the creation of this miracle, giving the alicorn something mysterious and mystical. The fusion of light and dark forces in this work of art created an atmosphere of unfathomable magic around it. Thus, the great celebration of Count Vernon, timed to coincide with the return of his eldest son, was not just a family dinner, but a true immersion in a world of fantasy and splendor. The audience, surrounded by this atmosphere, could not help but feel delight and amazement before the work of magic and art created by the great Count Vernon. In the majestic castle of Vernon, the Earl of Vernon planned a majestic performance for the feast called God's Day. Before the assembled crowds of courtiers and commoners, he decided to present an alicorn, a creature he had created with his hands, as a gift from God himself. The Count, rising before the people, announced with a mighty speech that the alicorn to be presented was a gift from God himself. The magnificent creature, combining incredible beauty and mystical power, was to serve as a symbol of the power and prosperity of the kingdom. Alicorn soared through the air like a messenger of God, appearing as a majestic picture of might. The creature's horns and wings glistened in the sunlight, creating an atmosphere of magic and admiration. The Earl of Vernon, with the lively gaze of a king and strategist, demonstrated his loyalty to royalty. The alicorn created by Vernon's hands became not only a symbol of the Vernon family, but also an illustration that royal power remains omnipotent and unshakable. Thus, the great performance at Vernon Castle became a parade of royal might, recreating in the eyes of the audience the splendor and power that the royal family and the Vernon family shared for the big day. Earl Vernon announced an important decision that would affect further events in the castle. He reported that starting tomorrow, his presence would not be in the castle, as he was awaiting an important meeting of mages, an event where great matters and the fate of the kingdom would be decided. The Count, expressing his confidence in his eldest son, Riquel, left him in charge of all household affairs in the castle. It was not only a high recognition of his abilities, but also a challenge for the young heir. Riquel, like a crown suddenly placed upon him, accepted the challenge with dignity and determination. Meanwhile, Count Vernon not only planned to meet with the wizards, but also shared an important announcement before the gathering. He heralded the wedding of his daughter Floria, a foreshadowing of a new union that would undoubtedly bring even more joy and splendor to the castle. Thus, before leaving for the magician's meeting, Count Vernon unfolded a kaleidoscope of events before his family, relying on Riquel's wisdom and stepping forward to family celebrations and a joyous future. Floria sat at the table watching her brothers, whose faces were on the opposite end of the table, carefully. It was clear to her that something was wrong with Arden, but she couldn't understand at all what was going on with Riquel. Floria's gaze slid over their faces as if reading the cryptic messages that lurked behind her brother's silence. At the other end of the table, the father, with visible concern, voiced his worries. He emphasized that Floria's wedding required special attention and suggested that relatives be invited. His voice sounded like a caring whisper directed toward his daughter, whose smile was dear to him. Floria, gathering her courage, expressed her determination to do everything possible to transform her future husband from panther to human. Her words sounded like a vow springing from the depths of her heart. She was ready to accept the challenge and put all her love and patience into this union. Her father, satisfied with her determination, left the table, leaving her brothers to glance at each other as if they were sharing some secret. Floria inwardly hugged her resolve tightly, knowing that the coming events could change not only her own life but also the lives of those she loved. Floria stood up from the table, following her brothers, but suddenly Riquel said that Floria should follow him. Her heart slowed as she heard those words. Her eyes flickered, but without further words or questions, she obeyed, rising from the table and heading for Riquel. A fire of curiosity flared in her soul as she tried to puzzle out the reasons for this unexpected turn. The mystery in this moment had a magical quality to it, as if she and Riquel were entering a new chapter in their lives. Riquel led her somewhere without revealing her cards, and Floria followed him, relying on her intuition and premonitions. She began to guess that all this was connected with her future spouse, and excitement swam in her eyes, creating a vague swirl of the unknown. Thus, in the silence of the castle, a new chapter of Floria's adventures began, where every step was a puzzling question, and every guess a clue. The eyes of the brothers who remained at the table followed her like sentinels of a mysterious event that time itself would tell. As the dark blanket of night enveloped the castle, Riquel, as if he were the lord of the night, appeared before Floria with a mysterious question. He delicately announced that one of the families had a valuable animal coveted by his father, and he was anxious to obtain it. It was all about the wedding, and Riquel lifted the veil of family secrets, telling of the value hidden in the charming creature. Floria listened attentively to every word, immersed in the secret mysteries of the family ties. Her eyes twinkled with curiosity, and her heart beat in time with the mysteries she was about to unravel. The night was a companion to their conversation, emphasizing the mystical atmosphere, as if the stars themselves were witnesses to the family's mysteries. And then, as if the stars had agreed, Riquel said that Floria was to go to a tea party with the family. The task was not an easy one, to find out about the animal that was the key to understanding her father's plans. Determination sparkled in her eyes, and her soul flared with the desire to penetrate the secret corners of another family's life, to uncover a secret that could change their own destiny. Thus, in the silence of the night, Floria prepared for a new stage of her journey, where every whisper of the wind and every star in the heavens were witnesses to the mysteries revealed in the light of the moon.